So welcome back to another SUPboarder video. We are going to be reviewing and giving you an overview look of the Bluefin paddleboard range. Really looking at the boards that most of you are commenting and asking about on social media and via our email. If this is the first SUPboarder review you've watched, then you're going to see us talking about each board and who would best suit them, the pros and cons to the boards in general, looking if we think they're value for money and seeing how we think these boards could be improved in the future, really helping you understand which board is right for you. Now, Bluefin do have quite a big range of paddleboards, and for some of you when you first go on their website it can be a little bit confusing, but we're going to break it down simply because when you start looking at it in two categories it does get a lot easier to understand. The easiest way to start off is looking at the two constructions that Bluefin offer. They do a standard base construction and they do a carbon base construction. With the name carbon, you're already thinking it's going to be stiffer, it's going to be more performance, and you're absolutely right. They are pushing that range to people who want to have a better paddling experience, definitely having a stiffer board under their feet, because of course all these boards are inflatable paddle boards as well. The standard range is the stripped back, more basic version of the carbon range. They still have very much the same sort of features and fittings. The refinement isn't so high as the carbon range, and definitely they are not as stiff, but we'll speak about that in a minute. By far the most popular range of boards in the Bluefin range is the cruise range. 10/8, 12 foot and 15 foot. You can get multiple people on there. 10/8 generally for one person, maybe two. The 12 foot, again, one person, maybe two. And the 15 foot is the bigger board, a tandem, two people board, or you could even paddle that as a one person board as well. The size of those boards, the 10'8" board is 32 inches wide, the 12 foot board is also 32 inches wide, and the bigger 15 foot is 35 inches wide. Now the wider you go in width, the more stability you will have. So if you are after a really stable platform of a paddleboard, you're going to have to go for a wider base board. The narrower you go in a paddleboard, the faster it'll be to paddle, the less effort you will have to put in to push yourself along the water, but the less stability you're going to have. The cruise range is the cheaper range of paddleboards. Prices start for the 10/8 at £499, similar price in US dollars, and go right up to the 15 foot at £799. And for that price you do get a complete package. You obviously get a bag, you get a 3-piece glass shaft nylon blade paddle with an extra kayak paddle attachment that you can put on the other end, take the handle off and you can make it into a kayak paddle. You also get a kayak seat that clips onto the board. You get all the stuff you need to get you going safely and paddleboarding on the water. Those boards will come with a well-known and well-designed click-in fin box system that we've reviewed on other brands. A really nice simple fin box system that's easy to use and gives you enough performance and a good stiffness of fin. Comes with a larger center fin and two smaller side fins, so it's great if you want to get into lots of different disciplines of paddleboarding. Maybe you want to take them SUP surfing, you want to take them touring, you could take the side fins out, just paddle with your center fin if you want to reduce your drag. But put all three fins in and it does give you enough area overall to get you going pretty much in a straight line even on your very first paddleboard session. The construction of the cruise range, they have exo surface laminate PVC, which all sounds pretty cool, and it's a pro weaved drop stitch. Basically means it's got internal core of a nylon drop stitch, which most inflatable paddleboards have, and then it's got multiple layers of thick, good quality PVC wrapping around the outside of the board. Before we move on to the cruise carbon range of boards, let's talk about the features that are on the cruise range still. Lots of handles everywhere. You've got your central carry handle. Obviously that's what you want to be carrying it down on your own to the water's edge, but if you're carrying it down with your friend or your partner, you've got carry handles at the front and at the back. You've got a large bungee setup at the front there that you can put your dry bags, anything you're stashing for the day's paddling activity. At the side of those bungees you've got also more extra handles as well, which is a nice thing to have. All of the boards come with action mounts and D-rings up at the front, which is great for putting your GoPros in, selfie cameras and extra stuff like that. In the mid part of the board you've got your kayak seat D-rings that you can clip your kayak seat on if you want to sit down and paddle your board. The Eva Deck Pad that's on the board is a chunky diamond grip deck pad, Diamond gripped EVA is generally the most grippiest deck pad that we've come across, and a lot of the main brands, the top boards, have that style of deck pad. And also, all the Bluefin boards are finished off with a raised EVA kick pad at the back, which is there for ramming your foot against when you want to do your step back turns. So moving on to the Cruise carbon range, what is the difference? Because they are more money, you're sitting at around £799 plus for that price point of boards, and they still are the same sizes as the Cruise range. You still get your 10/8, you still get your 12 foot, and you still get your 15 foot, all in the same widths and volumes as well. Well, package wise, there's a few differences that you get with the package. All the carbon boards come with a wheelie bag. You do get a better paddle. You get a carbon nylon paddle, which gives you a much more performance when you're paddling through the water. You'll find that your paddle shaft won't bend as much and you get much more response. Therefore, you can paddle faster for less effort. You get a better triple action pump. It's a double chamber pump. It has 3 settings on it. It's made by GRI. It's one of the best pumps in the industry, and it gets a lot more air in your board quicker, and you'll find it easier to get to that higher pressure as well, because it's got that nice reduced pressure setting right at the end when you're trying to finish off that high pressure of your board. Still get your kayak seat attachment, and all the carbon boards are finished off with side-in clip fin systems, but with a US center box system, which allows you to put a bigger fin in if you wanted to. Still get a good quality coiled leash. Then moving on to the board does look a little bit more swish. If you ask us, there are a few more extra fittings that you see on top of the board. You get extra bungee setups at the back there, and also extra handles either side of those bungees. So if you want to take more cargo, definitely there is more areas to stash your cargo front and back. The material of the deck pad itself is the same as the Cruise range of boards, but you do get extra handles either side of that central carry handle. You do get your front handles, and obviously you do get the extra handles either side at the back of the bungees as well. Now, they're all things that you'll notice when you're carrying your board in and out of the water, and you'll like the look of, and it definitely looks a little bit more stylish. But really, the stuff you will feel is the stiffness of the board and the materials that they've put on and in this board. Now, this board has a different construction to the actual standard Cruise altogether. The same internal drop stitch core, the same density of PVC and everything, so it's still got that outer shell which is the same, but it has an internal duo core, or a double chamber as some other brands call it, where you inflate an internal core first and then you inflate the outer chamber of the board. So in effect, you've got 2 inflation ports on this board. That does a few things. One, if you have a leak with your internal chamber or your external chamber of the board, you'll still be able to paddle home. You've got that extra bit of safety with that extra buoyancy that will stay in that board. But 2, really it gives you a lot more stiffness for the amount of air you put in it. The Bluefin's flex reduction system, which is their carbon rail they have down the side of their board, gives that board that extra stiffness again, which we'll speak about in a minute, but also it gives you a lot more durability to that rail. You've got a carbon layer of PVC carbon down the side of the board, so when you're holding the board up, lying on its rail, dragging it down on its rail, scraping against rocks, having an extra layer, material layer along the side there gives you a lot more strength, and it's going to stop any punctures or gouges getting into that internal chamber. Now I'm going to speak in more detail about the PSI pressure, the stiffness of these boards, and the weights of these boards in a minute. Let's carry on looking at the main range of paddleboards from Bluefin. Bluefin do also have the Aura Fit, which is a fitness, yoga, all-round baseboard, but it's definitely a wider baseboard. This is a 10'8" board, so it's the same length as one of the Cruise ranges, but it's 35 inches wide. So you've got a lot more width. Remember, more width, more stability, slower to paddle. So it's for somebody who wants to paddle a little bit, do a little bit of fitness paddling, not go particularly quickly, but really focus a bit more on board fitness, yoga, Pilates, anything you want to do with a nice stable platform. Personally, this is one of the best looking boards in the range. The top and the bottom of the board looks fantastic. You've got carry handles at the front, at the back, you've got your side carry handles. They've kept no carry handle in the center here, so it's nice and clear and away from your feet. You've got your bungee straps, so you can still put stuff under the front if you want to transport it. Still got the same construction as the Cruise boards themselves, and the fin setup is also the same. The price of that retails at £549, which is a really cheap board for getting yourself into fitness, yoga, and the package as well is the same package as you get with the standard Cruise range. So you get your fiberglass shaft 3-piece paddle with your nylon plastic blade, you get your standard double action pump bag, and obviously your leash. Okay, now let's have a quick look at the Sprint range of paddleboards. These are both 14-foot paddleboards by 30 inches wide. They make the standard Sprint and they make the Sprint Carbon. You've probably guessed the difference. Obviously the Carbon one has got the Air Duo layer, it's got the Carbon Flex reduction system on the rails, and it's got the better paddle and the better pump. Same bag, same leash, other things are the same. The boards themselves are much longer and slender, as you can see in the outline profile. Much more geared up to going places, traveling faster, putting cargo, yes, on the front and back. They've got the same amount of cargo straps on both those boards. Still got lots of handles, lots of places to carry the board to get them into the water, because you might be loading up these boards with a lot more gear and actually taking them places. SUP touring is a massive discipline in SUP. We're all personally doing it a lot and loving it, taking our families away for the weekend. And definitely, if you are interested in paddling around the corner, having a longer base board that you can get more kit on is a really good board to look at. Remember, it's narrower, so you're going to find it's going to be a little bit more unstable than a 34 inch wide board, but you're going to gain a lot more speed. You're going to gain a lot easier paddling per paddle stroke you're putting in. For the standard Sprint, you're looking at around £599, $699. It's a very good price point for a board to get you on the water and get you in SUP touring. For the Sprint Carbon, the better, stiffer board, which we'll speak about in a minute, you're looking at more like £899. It's more money, but you're getting the extra Air Duo chamber, carbon rails, and a bit more performance that you get with a stiffer base board. Now Bluefin do actually have a few more boards that we didn't actually have in this video. They also have a 8-foot kids SUP, great for getting your kids into paddleboarding. They also have a wider base 1010, which is a super stable wide board, maybe great for the potential fishermen out there. And they've also got the 18-foot by 60-inch SUP Mammoth board, which is there for obviously taking lots of people on, having a lot of fun, maybe post-COVID times when social distancing isn't so much of an issue. So now let's move on to what boards you should be looking at, the things you should be aware of, looking at the PSI pressures and the deflections of these boards. So first off, there's the range of paddleboards. You can see there's quite a big range of paddleboards there. So just remember, when it comes to choosing your first paddleboard, you really are trying to understand what you really want to do, how fast you want to paddle, how far you want to paddle, and how easy you want that to be. So if you're looking to paddle longer distances, you're looking for a longer base board. And you're trying to get a board that's got enough width so you can stand on it, but not too much width that slows you down. That's why the Sprint boards are that narrower 30 inches wide, much better for traveling further. For general all-round paddling, again, 10.6 by 32, that's your bulk standard average size. Rider weights, well, you can get a huge amount of weight on all of these boards. To be honest, they have got enough volume to it. It really comes down to how comfortable you feel in the stability of each board. You could be 120 kilos and jump on the 14-foot Sprints, no worries, but obviously it's only 30 wide, so you're just going to have to bear that in mind. It's not going to be as stable as a 32 or 35 wide board would be. So now let's talk about PSI pressures and stiffnesses of these boards, because this is a really big important thing to talk about with Bluefin SUP. Now Bluefin SUP recommend that all of their paddleboards can take up to 28 PSI, which is a high amount of PSI that you're probably never ever going to pump in your board. Basically, the more PSI you put in your board, the stiffer the board will feel, and a stiffer board gives you more performance on the water. Therefore, you're going to be paddling for less effort and further. And also, if you're heavier, you're going to want a stiffer board that's not going to bend so much, because a bendy board doesn't make a very good shape underwater, and it's going to mean you're going to be pushing water and you're going to be slower when you're paddling. So if you're a heavier person, looking at stiffness is really important to making you have an efficient board to paddle. The recommended PSI pressures for the cruise and the boards in the cruise construction, they are recommended from 15 to 80 in PSI, and then all of the cruise carbon boards and the carbon Sprint boards have a recommended pressure of 12 to 15 PSI, which is interesting. So they actually have a lower recommended pressure than the standard construction boards, even though that the max PSI pressure that Bluefin say all of their boards can take is up to 28 PSI. Now we did some tests with this, of course. We put these boards through our deflection test, which is where we put a board on a gap of 1.5 meters apart, and then we put 75 kilograms of weight on the center of the board, and then we measure how much the board bends or deflects. And then that gives us a really good idea if these boards stand up to other boards on the market, and to see if the constructions and the materials that they put into these boards do make these boards stiffer. So for this test, we used the Cruise 10.8 and we used the Cruise Carbon 10.8. Now bear in mind, the construction is exactly the same whether you're buying this fit board, it's still the standard Cruise construction, or you're buying a Sprint board or a Sprint Carbon, they're still the same constructions. Okay, so first test, Cruise, we pumped it up to 15 psi and it dropped 16 millimeters, which on its own is a very respectable drop. It sits at the better end of the performance out of all the paddle boards in the market. The stiffest boards in the market are sitting at 7, the most flexible are sitting at 25. So you can see it's getting near the low teens, which is where a good quality inflatable paddleboard needs to be. So that was at 15 psi. We then pumped it up to 18 psi and did the test again, and it dropped to 13 millimeters. So you can see how much more stiffness you gain by putting the extra psi pressure in your board. Then we did the Cruise Carbon. Now remember, this is the same construction as any carbon you're looking at in the Bluefin range. So the Cruise Carbon, first we did it at 12 psi, which is the minimum that they recommend, and it dropped 12 millimeters, which is already stiffer than the Cruise at the higher 18 psi in pressure. So you're bearing with me? So you're getting more stiffness straight away with the Cruise Carbon. Then we pumped it up to 15 psi, which is the maximum that they recommend for the Cruise Carbon, and that dropped 11 millimeters. So you're getting stiffer again. You can see where that board is much, much stiffer. And then we thought we'd increase that to the 18 psi, which is what they recommend for the standard Cruise board. But with the Cruise Carbon at 18 psi, it only dropped 9 millimeters, which shows you how much stiffer having the extra air duo layer is, and having the flex reduction system, or the carbon rail down the side of the board, how much that adds to the stiffness. So therefore you can see, if you are a heavier person, or you're wanting more performance, or you want to put more weight on your board, going for the Carbon is what gives you that greater stiffness. If you want to save your money, you're just going to have to pump your standard Cruise board up a little bit more, or if you want the easier life and you want the board that you don't need to put so much pressure in to get the higher stiffness, going for a Carbon is going to be a better board to look at to get you to that stiffness for less pressure. Now obviously when it comes to pumping those boards up, the differences are you are going to have to inflate that internal chamber, which might take you a little bit more time, but it's not very much. And the internal chamber, we were pumping up to 12 psi as well. So it's not a massive difference to actually inflating the board and getting yourself on the water time-wise. If we now talk about pros and cons and value for money, and then finishing off with a little summary of the Bluefin SUP range. The pros, well, you have actually got an incredibly stiff board no matter what type of construction or board you're looking at. There is a lot of stuff set up on the board to get you into water sports and paddling in general. You've got your kayak seat, you've got your extra paddle that you can make a kayak, you've got handles everywhere, you've got good bungees, the graphics are smart, the boards, as I said, are really stiff, and the price point, bringing value for money in there, they are very competitively priced, and you are getting a stiff board that's going to get you on the water and paddling places for not very much money. And cons, we're looking at the deck pad, really the EVA kick pad, which is the raised foam section at the back of the board. That could be placed further back on the board, especially when you're doing step back turns and in surf. Generally they are too far forward, they need to go a bit further back. The recommended PSI pressure on the Carbons, I don't quite understand why it's recommended and printed on the valves as a lower PSI pressure when it could easily take up to, as they say, 28 PSI. And if you did pump it up to 15 PSI, 18 PSI, you are going to get a very stiff board. The other thing, which is a very big con to be honest, and it's definitely something that you need to be aware about. If you are wanting a stiff board that's got lots of layers of material, that's very strong, you're going to have to understand it's going to be a heavy board. These Bluefin SUPs are heavy inflatable paddle boards. The sort of weights these are coming in at, your standard Bluefin Cruise 10.8, you're looking at 12.55 kilos or 27.66 pounds. Looking at that board again in the Cruise Carbon 10.8, you're looking at 14.91 kilos or 32.88 pounds, which is definitely a heavier weight board. It's one of the heaviest boards in the market. And if you're looking up towards the Sprint Carbons, the 14-foot boards, then you are looking at boards near around the 18.27 kilograms, or over 40 pounds, which is definitely a heavy board to be carrying in and out of the water. You will be needing those extra handles front and back to help your friends getting those boards in and out of the water, especially if you've got cargo on the front and the back. Again, this is a massive con, but it definitely has a big advantage with the stiffness of the board. If you want to make an inflatable paddleboard stiff, you need to have a good quality material inside the board, the internal core, and you need to have multiple layers of PVC or carbon or other materials around the outside of the board. The downside of having those materials is obviously the weight does go up. So as long as you're aware of it, you're going to be getting a good quality board that's very, very stiff for its price point especially, but it is going to weigh more than other comparable boards on the market. A little bit more about Bluefin. Well, they have been making paddleboards for a few years now. Definitely the Bluefin cruise has moved on a lot from 2018 when it first came out. We reviewed it last year, and big improvements on this year, the new 2020 model. The warranties of the boards, all the boards come with a standard 5-year warranty, which is pretty good to see. Definitely they're really happy on putting a good amount of backing behind their boards, showing that they're really happy with the quality and the materials that are going in these boards. Environmental awareness of these boards in general, when we're unpacking them, unfortunately there's still a lot of plastic around the actual boards themselves, and yes, we can recycle that plastic, but it's definitely harder to do than paper or cardboard. So it'd be nice to see Bluefin strip out their plastic in their packaging in the future. On the Bluefin website, they are actually trying to do a lot of work and really trying to push to the future and making their boards better, but they're really aware that they don't want to put shoddy materials in their boards, which reduces their lifespan overall. So Bluefin do look like a company that are aware of the environmental issues. We'd like to see them improved more with the packaging, and hopefully they keep working towards getting good recyclable based materials in and on their inflatable paddleboards in the future. So in summary, they are very well made with some good materials on them, and definitely they hit a very good package price point. They are definitely heavier than some other comparable paddleboards in the market, but they're definitely a lot stiffer than most paddleboards on the market, especially for that price point. Look out for a few more videos from us soon. We're going to be doing a sprint comparison vlog style video where Will took them SUP camping for the weekend and giving you his impressions and thoughts of those boards. And also we've got something special coming out from Bluefin, which we're going to be reviewing really soon as well. If you've got any feedback or comment about these boards, please let us know. It's always good to hear your feedback. Thank you very much. Check out SUPboarder Mag if you're not watching this video on there. Check out SUPboarder Pro if you're mad keen on SUP. But until next time, we'll see you on another SUPboarder video.